All right, let's dive right into this explainer on William Cameron Townsend. We're looking at a guy whose life story is this incredibly inspiring journey of global cultural impact. Honestly, he literally revolutionized the fields of global linguistics and cultural preservation. Whether you're a history buff, a language nerd, or just someone fascinated by how one single person's vision can completely change the world, this is a story you're going to want to hear. We're talking about how a young guy with hardly any resources transformed how we treat minority languages, basically ensuring that thousands of distinct cultures could preserve their heritage and read texts in their very own mother tongue. Let's get into it.
So we're dropping right into 1917 Guatemala. Picture this. You've got a young Townsend, super enthusiastic, maybe a little green, traveling through Central America, trying to distribute Spanish-language texts. But he hits this massive brick wall. He realizes there's this huge disconnect because a lot of the indigenous people he's meeting, they don't actually read or speak Spanish. Their first language is one of Guatemala's native tongues. And it's during this super frustrating time that a local man asks him a question that just stops him in his tracks. The guy basically asks, if this message is so important, why isn't it in our language? That one single question completely rewired Townsend's brain and changed his life forever.
Section 1, the question that changed everything.
To give you a sense of the timeline of his calling here, Townsend was born in 1896 in Compton, grew up with deep faith but, pretty limited funds. But we're really focusing in on that 1917 mission to Guatemala. That was the pivot. That was when he realized the standard, accepted approach at the time was a total failure. Later on, the timeline jumps to 1942 when he founds Wycliffe, all the way to his death in Waukesha in 1982. But again, it's that 1917 realization that kicks the whole thing off.
It led him to this profound conclusion. No one should have to learn another language before they can hear God speak. Because back in the early 20th century, the go-to strategy for both missionary work and just general education was all about assimilation. The whole idea was that indigenous people needed to adapt to the majority language, Spanish in this case, if they wanted to get an education or participate in society. But Townsend realized that forcing assimilation like that was just entirely backwards. It strips people of their identity and creates this totally unnecessary barrier.
Section 2, a radical new approach.
The contrast here is just wild. The old way was literally just expecting indigenous people to learn Spanish. Deal with it, right? But Townsend's way, he decided to embed himself in the culture and actually learn the indigenous Cakchiquel language. Instead of being this outsider demanding that everyone adapt to him, he humbled himself. He lived with the Cakchiquel people, ate their food, and painstakingly studied their unwritten, incredibly complex language. And he didn't just learn it to say hello. He learned it to eventually translate vital text into it.
The big takeaway here is that every people group deserves access to texts in their mother tongue. This experience fundamentally shifted his entire worldview. He started seeing every single language as this precious gift, a completely unique lens for understanding the world. And by making that his core belief, he dedicated his whole life to elevating minority languages that the rest of the world had basically just ignored.
Section 3, scaling a global vision.
But how do you actually take a personal realization in Guatemala and scale it into a global movement? Well, you have to build a rigorous linguistic process. Townsend knew that just casually translating wasn't going to cut it. He needed a repeatable methodology. Step 1, learn the local languages by living there. Step 2, study the grammar and linguistics, which often meant discovering grammatical rules nobody had ever documented. Step 3, and this is a huge one, develop writing systems for unwritten languages. You're literally creating alphabets from scratch. And finally, step 4, translate accurately and promote literacy. Because obviously, a translated book is pretty useless if nobody in the community knows how to read it.
To tackle this on a global scale, he obviously couldn't do it alone. So in 1942, he founded two distinct but highly connected organizations. You've got Wycliffe Bible Translators, which was focused heavily on translation and equipping local churches, but then equally important, you have the Summer Institute of Linguistics, or SIL. SIL was all about the science of it, phonetics, preserving endangered languages, creating dictionaries, and today, SIL is internationally recognized by major academic institutions for its massive contributions to linguistics.
Now, despite all this immense organizational growth, Townsend never turned into some distant, unapproachable CEO. He was constantly traveling the globe, operating with just incredible humility and optimism. He had this massive heart not just for indigenous peoples, but for the younger linguists joining his cause. His warmth and encouragement actually earned him the affectionate nickname Uncle Cam. He was very much a mentor right there on the front lines.
Section 4, a lasting cultural legacy. When we look at Townsend's legacy, it represents this monumental shift.
Beyond the translation work, he fundamentally promoted literacy among indigenous peoples globally. He actively fought against the erasure of native cultures, pushing for a really deep respect for minority languages. He authored impactful books like They Found a Common Language, and ultimately, he inspired a global movement. Today, there are thousands of linguists and educators operating on the foundation he built, making sure marginalized communities aren't left behind.
He had this great saying, "The greatest missionary is the Bible in the mother tongue." You see, he never sought personal glory. He didn't want the focus on himself or even on the foreign workers he trained. His entire goal was simply to empower communities through the dignity of their own words. By giving them texts in their native language, he was handing agency right back to the people.
Actually, his entire philosophy can be summed up in this one beautiful quote. A language is never just words, it is the heart of a people. When a language dies, a completely unique perspective on the human experience dies right along with it. Townsend understood that to respect a group of people, you absolutely have to respect their language. You have to treat every single language, even if it only has a few dozen speakers, as the living, beating heart of its culture.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to ask yourself, what is the true value of your own mother tongue? Think about how the language you grew up speaking shapes your humor, your memories, your entire worldview. Imagine someone telling you that to learn or grow, you had to completely abandon it. William Cameron Townsend dedicated his life to making sure no one had to make that sacrifice. It really puts into perspective the immense value of preserving that gift for every culture on Earth. Thanks for hanging out with me to explore his story.